Assalamu alaikum warahmatullah. Bismillah. Wassalatu wassalamu ala rasulihi wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in wa man tabi'ahum bi ihsani ila yawmiddin wa ba'd. So we'd like to welcome you all to our monthly installment of our family night, inshallah, where we try to take a moment to enjoy each other's company for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to increase our brotherhood and sisterhood, join our hearts together, and we try to try to bring some benefit by way of a little small lesson, inshallah ta'ala. So we thank you all for showing up, inshallah ta'ala. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to accept it from us. I mean, so this will be a brief talk. It really in light of some recent events. A couple of weeks ago, we buried a giant, a mountain in the city, Imam Radi Abdullah. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to have mercy on him. And please recite Al-Fatiha for his soul. Al-Fatiha. Alhamdulillah, we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to make his grave spacious and to make it light and make him from one of the honored inhabitants of Jannah. I mean, and so as he passed away and as being a fellow Imam and being someone who learned greatly from him and always visiting him and always getting some good information, me also being Imam, it started making me think about, the future, thinking about what we're leaving behind and all the work that we put in, inshallah, as communities, what will be the final result, because none of us know the outcome. We don't know what's going to be accepted by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, what we're going to be forgiven for. And so all of that is motivation to keep us going. So it started making me think about leadership, past leadership. Many African communities are struggling with leadership and the nation, capable, suitable of a job, and traditionally in Islam is like the one who led the prayers in the masjid, right? Or the one who was the leader in a particular science, like for instance, we know the four imams of fiqh, they were imams in the science of jurisprudence or fiqh or rulings. And so meaning they were leaders in that, but traditionally leading the prayer. But in our environment, the imam wears a number of hats, and a lot of them, some of them he's not qualified for. Some of them is just by default, it just comes with the territory. And it's a lot of work, being a counselor, father figure, provider, referee, police officer, psychologist, mortician, marriage counselor, divorce attorney, all of these things that if you add them up, those are a number of careers that should be rich. And, there actually is a study about, imams in the black communities and really not getting paid, So we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to enrich all of our imams in the field doing the work. I mean, but it made me think about, because I believe that community now is kind of having some challenges of who's going to succeed them, and some of the discussions that they have, and I've been part of them about, they have an assistant Imam Tenant, may Allah bless them. They have some other elders there, wisdom, but the youth is what should be concentrated on. We actually had a meeting with them. This was when Imam Radi was still alive. And we were discussing some of the issues that we need to do as communities and trying to combine them. And I have brought up the idea, when we talk about successors, let's not talk about us, those who were present, so some of them were candidates, or people they was considering. Let's not talk about us. Let's talk about the ones that we need to bring up later, And so this is what sparked my talk tonight. And I've entitled it, Looking at What's Ahead of Us with What's Right in Front of Us. Looking at what's ahead of us with what is right in front of us. And meaning what's right in front of us is our youth, and particularly our boys. And so there's a lot of work that's involved in developing the next generation, getting them ready for leadership, and not what we've been doing as Sheikh Issa Bey, may Allah preserve him, he said, we just been surviving. All of the work that, our neighbors at Masjid Noor, may Allah preserve them, we call them the pioneers. Some of them been Muslim 50, 60 years. I think the youngest member around there is Imam Tennant, and he's in his mid 60s, early 60s. And so they've been around there, they've established the precedents for us. They were a seller for us. They were precedents for us. And, we have a big responsibility in fulfilling his shoes. And, what I'm pretty sure that Imam Radi, what he will want his legacy to be is for the deen to continue and to prosper, And so that's one of the challenges that we face. But then the question is asked, who do we leave it to? Who's capable of stepping up? Who's capable of filling those shoes of someone like Imam Radi over 40 years of service, 40 years of being a stand-up Imam, being present, inshallah ta'ala. And so we make dua for that community, because they're going to be facing some great challenges of how to organize all of that. And, you can imagine how difficult it is, losing somebody like that, It's like losing a lifelong partner. How do you cope? And those are things they have to work with. We are in their service, inshallah ta'ala. But it made me think, it brought to the story about, when we talk about youth and development, we read Surah Al-Kahf every Friday, and we know about the story of the companions of the cave, right? The Ashab al-Kahf, the 7 boys, and the Bible is called the 7 sleepers. So this is a famous story that's not unique to Islam, but it's unique to Islam in the details of the story that the Prophet of Islam, he had no way of knowing about except through revelation. And so the boys, the Allah says in the Quran, A'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajim, bismillahir rahmanir rahim. When he's describing these boys of the cave, he says, Innahum fityatun amanu bi rabbihim wa zayadnahum huda. He says, verily, they were boys who were fityatun. They were boys who were adolescents, right? So they reached the age of adolescence, which is normally around the age between 10 and 19 years old, right? And they believed in their Lord. وَآمَنُوا بِهِمْ. And they believed in their Lord. And we increased in happiness. So when you read the story every week and the magnificence of the story, one thing that you don't hear about, and it's not in any tafsirs that I know of, is they reach adolescence. What about the stage before it? Who were their parents? What is it that gave these boys the ability to stand up to the king and say, we believe in Allah? We didn't want to be a part of any pagan festivities that they used to have there. And you're talking about, let's say, if adolescents, they had to be at least between 10 and 15, more than likely. That's usually the age that we consider, right? And like 15 in the Shafi'i school, you consider a man, right? If you're 15 before you have any wet dreams or pubic hairs, whichever one comes first, that means you're technically a man or the age of caliber or responsibility. So who nurtured these boys to be able to take that kind of stance? Because we can all think about in adolescent years, and what were we doing? We would call juvenile delinquents. Yeah, shucking and jiving. We were doing what was popular. We was running with our crews. We were just being mischievous, and we had a whole society that empowered it, And I know this still probably goes on. We used to call it mischief night or mystery night, Whatever you did the night before, it was a mystery. We don't know who did what, but we all know who did it, right? And it went from innocent stuff like throwing, writing on windows with soap and throwing eggs to, I remember the last time I was involved, man, we was having grenades and stuff like that, So, but thinking about these 50atun, these young boys, right? And technically, when you reach puberty, that is the technical age of adulthood, but doesn't mean maturity, right? And it is a unique stage of development, meaning that if children are really not developed at that age, they're going to have some problems, right? And they've even done studies about, adolescence and mental health, right? And if a child's mental or adolescent's mental health is not intact, by the time, they reach a certain age, then they'll have problems with relationships, with obeying authority, with communication, with affection. All of these will impact them if they miss this crucial stage of development during the adolescent years. But even more important than the adolescent years is the years before that, right? And so you think we got any Wire fans in here?
Yeah.
Okay, The Wire. You remember the season with the children, the education season?
Mm-hmm.
And the dude was, they wanted to do a study on the kids.
Yeah.
And so they brought one of the kids in there. He was already 18. And he was scaring the mess out of him, man. Yeah. So he wanted to get an older demographic. He had him in the head because he like, man, what you writing? He shook him up. He wasn't used to doing the young kid. And so he said, I think we'll go lower age, right? So he went to school around, and so the season was like, they were like considered junior high, maybe 14, 15. And then you see probably one of the most traumatic scenes when the two girls were fighting and she sliced her face open.
Yeah.
Right. And so we see that dramatic, but what was the nurturing with those kids? And then some of the other ones you see in that season, little dude's name. No, not him. The other one that was in school. He was in the talented class, but he was real smart. But then they found out they had problems at home. He was calling the lady all types of expletives. I forget it. He didn't have a big part. Yeah, but he was wilding. And so he cussed the teacher out and stuff like that. And when they finally got in the school, they got him in the principal's office, they found out that his mom had passed away. And he just had no outlet. He just had to come to school. So he was carrying a lot of stuff, And so a lot of these adolescents at that age, we've got kids in school, come to school, school, no conditions. We just had a meeting today about a growing number of children who are outside after hours. Police are locking them up. They have a mandate to not have them out there. And then when they bring these kids home, the parents don't even care. They don't even care. Then when they bring them back, they want to blame the police officer, like, why you got handcuffs on my son? But that's right. What's going on in the house, and one of the police officers that was there at this program we had today, and he was discussing, some of these places, he can't believe how they living in it. It's roach infested, it's dirt everywhere, it's a mess. But then when you see the money, $1 million, Louis Vuitton, they got, these, I don't know, the bags, they got shoes, they got their whole investment on their body, right? And so, as an example, if you see the comparison between these children of the cave or these companions of the cave and children nowadays, how important it is when kids are deprived of nurturing and proper upbringing and proper structure, right? And so, these have long-term consequences. And with our people, we have deep levels of brokenness. Deep levels of brokenness that are impacting our kids very young, where they are learning stuff they are learning traumatization just by default. Our boys are growing up, in many instances, to learn how to hate their father, learn how to be, be authoritative over their mothers, and that's because something is missing, right? And we kind of know with the broken family, the man being deprived of making a living, having authority in his house, all of these things. And one thing that people don't talk about is the ill impact of zina, right? Because you just think about it, many of us, when we grew up, nobody taught us about the harms of zina. Mm-hmm. Matter of fact, it was a rite of passage. You weren't considered a real man, or if you didn't have a girlfriend, or you didn't, we grew up with older guys, and if you kissed a girl, that's all you did, that wasn't enough. You had to do all these other things. And we didn't know it at the time, that we were only looking for, sensual pleasure, but we didn't know the harms of it. And then I know many of my peers, you know, it was all fun until the girl got pregnant. And then, you know, we weren't ready for fatherhood. You know, man, you got to get rid of it. It ain't my baby, you know. And all of these things, we 25. Well, I'm keeping the baby. Well, it ain't mine. And so now it's a broken home already. And the kid comes in the world with not even a half a chance. All right. And then he sees this toxic behavior between the mother and the father already before he even knows what's going on. But he has, or she has, the ability to discern, like, why mommy and daddy ain't together. Right. If a kid is thinking that at a small age, that's traumatization. Right. That's going to impact them with their relationships when they get older. And, you know, we honest about the conversation. No one was ever thinking about, you know, when we was hanging out and chasing girls or girls trying to bag dudes, nobody was thinking about family. Nobody was thinking about, you know, this is the person I want to settle down with. It was just about the moment, right? And then the evil of it came later, and it was a blessing to get children out of it, but these were children born out of wedlock, you know. And so Allah was subhanahu wa ta'ala, and that doesn't mean like children born out of wedlock are bad, it's just that these things are harmful, right? And so it brings the ayat where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَلَا تَقْرَبُوا الزِّنَا إِنَّهُ فَاحِشَةٌ إِنَّهُ كَانَ فَاحِشَةً وَسَاءَ سَبِيلًا. He said, do not come close to zina. Don't even, of things that will lead you to it, don't come close to those because it's a fahisha. And he used this word kana fahisha. Kana is a verb, means to be. But when it's used in a sentence in Arabic, it means that something that happened in the past that is ongoing. It says, "Innahu kana fahishatan," that it is the best way to translate it is ever evil thing. That it will always be an evil thing. It will be currently going on, something that's been happening. It will always be evil, and it was sabila, and it is an evil way. And the way that it opens up to evil is all of these things that we're seeing that stems from men and women having the sensual pleasure without the responsibility. This is the harms of it, you know, and we see this a lot. And this is, you know, it's not a coincidence that, you know, many of our families are with single homes, and of course, the deadbeat dad thing is a myth, right? But even if a dad is taking care of children, right, there's still the missing element of a two-parent household, the mother and the father, and having structure and nurturing, being able to bring a child up, you know. And if it's missing in the Muslim community, and many of us are converts or reverts, right, and we had to learn it by the grace of Allah, who's subhanahu wa ta'ala, being Muslim, right, and we might have had some elements of it before, but Allah heightened the awareness for us when we became Muslim. We realized the responsibility. Imagine someone who has no faith and they're trying, but then it's toxic. You know, how many children, you know, we probably seen some abuse. Our mothers getting beat, or even our fathers getting abused verbally, right? Or even physically, you know. We know stories of fathers getting, you know, and all of these things. And I remember in my generation, we were like the last, well, we are in the same generation, but my age range. We were like at the top of that generation that stopped seeing men in the neighborhood. Because I remember vividly, you know, 9 to 10 years old, there was only like 2 kids in our class that we knew who their fathers were. Mm. And I know one, I'll never forget him, is Mr. Brady. One of my good friends' name is Troy Brady. His father, I always knew him since I was a little kid. Him and his mom, they was together. You always seen them together. And you seen other kids with their fathers, but we didn't know that it was like visitation rights and all that. We just know we seen their fathers every once in a while, and then we never seen them like at any events, you know. And even now, it's all mothers, you know. And if a father shows up, it's like, you know, like a dignitary. Like they, you know, I remember being in the school. H probably knows, right? They give you awards just for showing up. I'm like, man, I ain't even do nothing. I didn't earn Father of the Year. I just showed up because this is what I'm supposed to do. You don't give me Father of the Year. Nah, that's not good. But zina has led to a lot of evils, and if you do a study, a lot of these children probably come from these kind of environments. The ones who are causing the trouble, the ones who are reckless, the ones who are in danger, and they're coming younger and younger. You know, they don't in the house, they don't recognize an authority. And so they don't respect any authority. And I remember growing up, just mad at anybody. Like, if you wasn't my dad, I didn't have to listen to you unless you had to like beat me up. You know, it had to be the hard way, but it wasn't by any kind of like virtue. You know what I'm saying? Like normally would be you respect your elders because you saw elders being respected, or you that was drilled. So a lot of things that's impacting. And some of us being converts to Islam had children out of wedlock. You know, we had toxic relationships, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has, guided us. And then we also see another problem that, some short-sighted people have been promoting this thing that if you had children out of wedlock, there's narration about the children being the mother of the bed. And, this mentality where, they not allowed kids responsible for, and it's also harmful. Because, to be honest, we lost the bridge. A lot of these young Muslims who are involved in these gangs and doing all this shooting, they come from that product. They come from that environment. That somebody married their mom and divorced them. They didn't see any stability. They didn't see any structure. And for them to pick up a gun because they don't have any kind of remorse. They don't have any kind of sentiment, or they're too sensitive. That's why they have to go there, And they call it shooting the fade, but we used to call it shooting the fair one. And everybody growing up, and y'all know, we had to know how to fight. You had to know how to fight to get somebody off you to prevent them from bullying you. You had to know how to do something, and it was also a rite of passage. I don't know if this is traumatization or not, but I remember I'm telling you, if somebody touches you, you better pick up a brick, bust them in the head. My mind, whatever's close to you, and then it just seemed like always close to it, like like a 2x4, a brick, a bottle, and it saved me a lot of times, But all that was traumatizing, But we didn't have anybody to show us, like, how do you walk away from things? How do you, leave it alone, or how do you handle it? Even if you have to, a father telling you to go out there and fight is way different from your mother being reactionary because you got something to prove. You're trying to validate. Seek validation from your father, which is very, very important, But this thing of Zinad is, it's an even bigger problem now. And we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to keep us safe. But these boys in the cave, the purpose of this talk is how important nurturing is, and this is a concept in Islam is called tarbiyah. You all have heard this term before, tarbiyah, right? Tarbiyah means like to nurturing or cultivation. And it comes from the same root as the word Rabb. We heard the word Rabb. We recite Al-Fatiha. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Rabb means, they translate it as Lord, but it means like a cherisher, the nurturer, or the one who brings you from a state of helplessness to a state of completeness and watch you along the way. This is what Allah does. He's the Lord, the cherisher. Brings you from a state of nothing to a full completeness where you're able to function on your own. This is what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala does for his creation, And so tarbiyah for parents is nurturing, structure, cultivation, because we are in a crisis where we have to start developing these children to be the next leaders of Islam, right? The next leaders of our communities, the next leader of the households, the husbands, the fathers, the neighborhood block captains, anything that, that's going to have stability in the society, we have to work now in developing it. So look at what we have before us so we can start developing the future. Because in many communities, the youth are not there. The youth have left the masjid, and, that's very important. But how many people that you all know, I'm pretty sure, that you run across and you never even knew they were Muslim, right? Because you haven't seen them in the communities, because there was a disconnect there between them, between the elders and the youth, and maybe more of it was about discipline and authoritativeness instead of nurturing and caregiving and, bringing them along, And so this is how the companions of the Prophet ﷺ were. They were around him learning manners. And some of the stuff that we might not think is important or people might not know how to do because they haven't seen it done. Little things like, yes, ma'am, no, ma'am. Even some of the hardest OGs and gangsters knew you better not talk disrespectful to somebody's mom or your neighbor, you know what I mean? Or I remember, coming up, and if you see your neighbor come, you try to hide your stuff, And generation before us, we hanging out in the corner, you know, you had to, hide your liquor and all that kind of stuff, and because such and such grandma was great, walk past, and you didn't want to see that because you had respect for it, you know. And compare that to today, like what, kids don't even speak to you properly. Hey, good morning, young man. What's up? You know, and people might not think this is a thing, but this is kind of disrespectful, you know. And some of us adults, we doing the same thing, you know. And part of it is trying to relate to them and their culture and where they at, but some of it that it has to be a line drawn. Like, okay, I come down on your level at the same time to respect me as an adult. You know, find a fine line. So this nurturing, because it's not a given that our children will follow us in the deen. It's not a given. And so Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions another verse. He says, وَالَّذِينَ آمَنُوا وَاتَّبَعَتْهُمْ ذُرِّيَّاتِهِمْ بِإِيمَانٍ. And those who believe and the ones who follow them, their offspring, their descendants, be Iman. And follow them in Iman, follow them in faith, follow them in belief. Many times we want our offspring to emulate us. We want to leave them some type of wealth. We want to leave them something, help them to get, on their feet or whatever. But we need them to follow us in Iman. And if they're going to follow us in Iman, we have to lead them in Iman. To have has to be the very most important thing. As you were saying to one of the young men earlier, your deen first and then, education. But the deen is education, So knowing who your Lord is and recognizing it's right upon you is with everything else in your life, So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, Al-Haq, Al-Haq, Al-Haqna bihim, Duriyatihim. Then we will join them with their offspring, meaning in the Akhirah. We will join them together. So if we take all of the steps necessary to ensure that our children have Iman, that they're practicing the religion, and we're giving all the tools, we're putting them in environments, where they have an instruction and care and nurturing, then we're taking what we have in front of us to help us to go forward, inshallah, because this is a crisis with our communities across the country. It's a crisis with our communities around the country. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to help us, And as we mentioned, it's not a given. Look at the son of Noah, alayhi salam. He said to get on the ark. He said, I'm going to hide in the mountains. I'm going to be secure in the mountains. No, son, there's no security when this flood comes, And Noah made, alayhi salam, made dua to Allah. My son, he said, he is not from your family. And so one of the greatest prophets of Allah, Prophet Noah alayhi salam is known as one of the 5 special prophets. So trivia, who are the other 4? Who are the other 4, H? I call H sleeper, so I put him on the spot. Prophet Isa alayhi salam, Noah, Muhammad sallallahu alayhi salam.
You said Noah, Ibrahim.
And probably one of our favorite prophets, punched a man and killed him.
Oh, Musa.
Musa was the embodiment of manlyhood, And so Prophet Noah alayhi salam was one of the 5 special prophets, and even his son wasn't safe from, disbelief. So you can be as righteous as you can, or the appearance of righteous, and our kids might be picking up something else. And not saying that Noah alayhi salam was the appearance of righteous. I'm saying like whoever Allah guides, Well, like he said, the ayah we mentioned earlier about the people of the cave, and we increased them in huda. We gave them knowledge because of what they already presented. And so this is important, what's already as a precedent before Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sends you gifts that you recognize. So just think about the favor that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave us, but we already had something. It might have been blurry, it might have been obscure, but we already had something when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala made it manifest to us that he chose us, because he chose us in the world before, right? But he made it manifest to us why he chose us. And if you think about it, you had qualities before that transferred over to the deen. If you were good in school, if you were good in sports, if you were good in managing, if you were good in leadership, these are things that Allah gives you in the deen as well, right? and you just know the purpose of doing it. It's not just for advancing in the dunya, it's for earning his pleasure, right? And so those the descendants need to follow us in iman. So we have to have good iman present, good examples, so that our children can emulate, because it's just like I might get in trouble for this one, but it's like someone, and you hear these things about being who you are. A father has a son, right? And I ain't gotta say it. What's one of the worst things you fear for your son?
You be gay.
Yeah, that he's gay, right? Or one of the worst things that worry us is that something can happen to our sons in the street.
Like jail.
Yeah, jail and getting killed early or stuff like that. But one of the things you ask most fathers, man, my son is gay, man. I don't care how much I'm supposed to love him. I can't accept that. And I refuse to believe that people say that they accept it, that they really accept that. I think it's an agenda, but that's a whole nother discussion. But I know, man, I'm like, you see your son doing something that resembles, hey, man, hey, boy, what's wrong with you? Don't let me ever catch you doing that no more, right? Yeah, that's important because, your sons and daughters are your pride and joy. But, with this whole concept of how much work we got to do in developing, because, alhamdulillah, we always have a nice group of young boys like we have here tonight. And even though, some people might criticize of how we let them play, this is actual nurturing because they're learning concepts that, that's going to hit them later. They learn the cooperation. They learn the sportsmanship. They learning, showmanship. They learning integrity. They learning how to be peaceful with each other. Yes, service. And now our job is to get them ready to, do this service for the dean. So there's going to be a element of training, education, dean wise, training them how to be men, how to deal with women, how to deal with neighbors, how to deal with society, how to avoid anger, how to avoid depression. And so we got a lot of work ahead of us. So just thinking about Imam Radi and their community, and we ask Allah, who is upon without it, to make us a means to aid them because they are our pioneers, to show us the way, showed us how to be men, showed us just by their presence. One of the greatest things of being a man is to have a presence. Our brother Issa Bey used to always tell us stories about his father, Sheikh Ibrahim Bey. We recite Al-Fatiha for him and his wife. Sheikh Ibrahim Bey, rahimahullah. I met him a few times, and I was always intrigued by his presence because he had a very intimidating presence without saying anything. You can just tell he was intense, And I met him in his older years where he was just smiling and, alhamdulillah. But he used to tell us stories about when he was younger, people, oh, no, Mr. Bey, man, And that meant a lot because he's telling stories of people his age are telling him and their grown men about the impact that their father had on, and just his presence alone, and what they knew he would do if he was pushed, right? And so that's important for us because now we're at that age where we have to be an influence on younger kids. We are the ones who have to fix some of these broken kids that are growing up, whether they're ours or other people, because we cannot be comfortable with just our own children, right? We got to be comfortable with embracing our neighbors' children, the school children, and especially the ones that, we try to specialize in, the ones who already have been broken. We've had a couple of them here, that they were, did some stuff and, but they need men like us to check them, and it's unfortunate because when we be ready to discipline them, right, as we should, but then we have to go back and look that they missed some nurturing in their adolescent years. They missed a lot of nurturing, stuff that not even the basics, right? And so this is the battle that we up against to produce the next generation that's going to lead us. We ask Allah who's subhanahu wa ta'ala for tawfiq, inshallah, and to give us the ability to do this work and to achieve the means and the goal to do it, inshallah. So that was all I had today, inshallah. I don't know if there are any questions. We have some people online, I believe. I don't know if you all had any questions.
Good.
Okay. Yeah, so yeah, just thinking about it, and one of the things hanging around older people is they still make you feel young, but you ain't that young.
Right.
Because I always I'm in a group with some older brothers. They're not Muslim, but they just elders, and so we be having discussions, and I'm still figuring out why am I in this group? Because I think the youngest one is like 71.
Yeah.
I'm like, how did I get in this group? But I love it, man, because I'm not a fool like thinking I'm younger than them. But I'm an elder to someone that's younger than me, an elder. Because I forget how that classification goes.
Oh,
Yeah, I'm almost an elder status.
I've seen one of my youngins. Now, I mean, he's a man that I've been to. I'm like, hey, he calls me, what's up, old man? And I'm like, I'm responding, but I'm like,
I ain't no old man now, you know what I mean? But yeah, I'm older
like,
than you.
when you think about it,
Right.
in our culture,
stage.
he really is.
Yeah.
Does that mean you outside
And so-
the young boy walk by? Like, what's up,
Yeah.
And so that, so, we know that we're not old because you had to balance, look at those who are ahead of you and those who are below you, and status and rank and age, so I love engaging those older brothers. But now, the younger brothers where the concentration is, and there's a big gap with the youngers and the younger brothers and older brothers that we have to work to bridge, and inshallah. So it's a lot of work, because we don't know. Sometimes, we have a brother Hamza here and Mr. Bay, and I'm sure Brother Rob, you worked with some youth before, that we inherit some of this stuff that, we don't know who we get, but we know we see a young black kid in the ghetto, you know what I mean, in the hood, and he has a lot of problems by the time we get him early, and we have some mothers that really call on us, be like, you really just take my son, okay, and then you have to wonder, okay, what were you doing prior? What do you expect me to do? This man, this kid don't know how to do stuff, but it also is an opportunity for us to earn Allah's pleasure to do that hard work of fixing his brokenness. And we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And so we'll end it there. Thank you all for who tuned in online for this little brief talk. Sisters, we hope you got something of it. I don't know if you all had any questions or anything, or that you even listening. I hope that was a shot. That was shots fired. Alhamdulillah. So we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to accept it from us. ربنا تقبل منا إنك أنت السميع العليم. ربنا لا تزغ قلوبنا بعد إذ هديتنا وهب لنا من لدنك رحمة إنك أنت الوهاب. سبحان ربك رب العزة عما يصفون والسلام على المرسلين والحمد لله رب العالمين. السلام عليكم.
Y'all can copy